The next speaker, Michael Kirsch, is well known, or should be well known to most of you. His work, particularly on Andrew Jackson, and his work on the legislation for what has been called the Third National Bank, has been circulated very widely by us. And he's sharing his responsibilities today with Paul Gallagher. We're going to hear first from Michael and then from Paul. Michael?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. And yes, my name is Michael Kirsch, and I'm going to speak with you today about the United States credit system and what that involves. There's really only two important sections of the population of the planet that determine the course of history. One are the nation builders, and two are the oligarchs and those who run what is a monetary empire now governing the planet. The former is in short supply. And it is really the nation builders which is the utmost necessity and importance for us to have if we're going to have a credit system and if we're going to reinstate Glass-Steagall and rebuild the United States. Without nation builders, there is no credit system. There's no mechanical solution that can be installed and will run its course and make everything once again great. It is the nation builders that have to take the lead. Now, since the foundation of our nation, the chief and central aim of the monetary empire has been to divert the eyes and minds of citizens away from the powers and laws which uphold nations. It's created sophistries of monetarism, which creates citizens who think like its slaves. Monetarism always looks backward to the past, monetizing the results of past production rather than the creation of new wealth. It lures citizens to look at these shadows of the past. Creations of wealth are viewed as mechanical excretions, randomly occurring from mathematical laws of supply and demand. It tricks them into thinking about how many goods can be liquidated for immediate profit instead of new creations. It tricks them into thinking of debts as objects instead of actions that generate value in the process of their extinguishment. It views all debts as self-evident burdens which must be gotten rid of. And it looks at capital and labor rather than the productive powers which create them and draw forth their potential. Now, this has been the method to get sovereign nations to pass laws against the interests of their own citizens and to destroy themselves. In contrast, nation builders do not think like slaves of an empire. Nation builders observe the requirement to constantly increase the energy flux density of an economy, which determines the productivity level by determining the context of the power source and rate and cost of production and transportation of raw materials and finished goods. They understand that man controls nature by power-producing instruments from the discoveries of the mind. Mind has its power to convert natural agencies into supernatural forces. The development of plows, mills, furnaces, steam engines, railways, examples of this. They understand that mastering and harnessing the laws of nature and improving upon them is the identity behind the establishment of a nation. And this was the identity of Benjamin Franklin. The rights gained by sovereignty and those who worked with Benjamin Franklin to found the nation made it possible to channel the development of arts and sciences toward the benefit of the general welfare, making discoveries of principles of nature available to all. Now, this process is served by the United States credit system. The United States credit system as it was developed and came into fruition with Alexander Hamilton, but beginning with Cotton Mather and developed by Benjamin Franklin, is something where the currency is not viewed as wealth itself, but the constitutional responsibility of government to facilitate the spirit of enterprise and scientific ingenuity. Now, it was this process, 7 years leading into the Constitutional Convention under Alexander Hamilton, and all of those who he worked with, Benjamin Franklin, off in France, receiving the report of Robert Morris as financier, James Wilson, Gouverneur Morris, the most active members of the Constitutional Convention. That was the chief cause for them to arrive at that happy occasion of the Constitutional Convention. As Alexander Hamilton said, a nation without a national government is, in my view, an awful spectacle. But a national government necessitates a credit system in order to be effective. And these men, for 7 years, beginning in 1780, understood that what was required was a credit currency. And it was Hamilton's conversion of what was a monetary paper currency and monetary debts into a credit currency that tied the nation's future, the success of all the states, translated the action of making good upon the debts into the currency itself, which founded and built the nation. The intention to make good on the debts defined the currency, and the economy became a drive to build the nation. The economy, the meaning of economy, became the drive to build the nation. Now, in the credit system that he established, he was able to actualize what was this essential principle of economy, where it is a physical system of productivity as how it is viewed, where the measure of value in an economy is not things, material things, capital and labor that have been created, but the mental powers which created them, which increase the productive powers of labor and capital, and therefore become the measurement of all action in an economy and all productivity. New innovations that arise increase the profit of the credit system and further increase the productivity of the economy. Now, in this credit system that was established, you had an effect, which I want to describe to you, which is that the economy's operations were maintained increasingly within the time scale of productivity. Less and less goes into balancing past debts or present debts. Less and less is allowed to create an excess immediate demand for payment in the present. But you have an increasing ratio of more and more future payments according to future growth and productive investment that will take place through the promise of productivity, through promissory notes, faith, and credit amongst an increasing amount of the total population involved in productivity. And as it was demonstrated under Alexander Hamilton and John Quincy Adams and Nicholas Biddle, that system allowed for a currency to essentially be a reflection of that process, that it united the resources and growth of the economy in the establishment and the circulation of that currency. So the currency was not something that was separate, and the financial system was not something that was separate. It became the shadows of increased rates and efficiency of domestic production and increasing facility of investment and further consolidation of credit. And this was the essential principle of the credit system, and which it is a principle, that it is a currency united with the resources and growth of the economy. And this process was necessary for something. It was necessary to ensure the reason the Constitution itself was formed. As I said, it was not that we created a Constitution and then we said, oh, we can establish an economy that operates on the future. It was the intention and necessity to create an economy that operated on the future that led and was the driving cause of the Constitution. Because it's impossible to uphold the Declaration of Independence, the equality of man, not the right of private property. That was not what the Constitution was upholding, but the right. I should say the Constitution was not to protect property, but to protect right, and specifically the right to be productive, to not waste the mind of the individual at the hand or the mind of the empire. Because with the right to be productive, the spirit of enterprise becomes animated through more and more credit agreements, and the morality of the population improves. And it is the right, and should be, of all men to become productive and to embark on pursuits of happiness, pursuits of industry, pursuits of science, which is the meaning of Ben Franklin's pursuit of happiness discussion, on borrowed capital, on a small interest, but to obtain the ability to become productive and tie yourself to the future. Not to receive a handout of money or an equal distribution of wealth, but to receive the ability to become productive. So this system, those who say that this is a fancy, the general welfare is a figment of the imagination, it is because they don't understand that the Constitution was formed for this purpose of creating a future-based financial system. And a lot of people want to know, well, how do you really make sure that the national bank that you would establish, how does it really do this? And how would it really be different than the Federal Reserve? Well, it's because Alexander Hamilton made it that way, and Nicholas Biddle made it that way. They made it function for that purpose. There was nothing mechanical about it. The interest of the bank was fused with the nation because they made it function in that manner. So why did they do that? It's because they were nation builders. The intention of them to found a nation, as with Ben Franklin, individuals who decided to take it upon themselves, that was the most substantial thing and the most necessary most necessary substance that must be present in order to make the credit system function. And it is a principle, the national bank, to create a system of increasing more and more of the economy operating on future payments in the future. And not something that's a separate institution, but guides the whole economy and makes the entire economy operate on this timescale of productivity in mind. Now, if we were to embark upon such a system today, we would be, if we had the ability, embarking on a certain type of national organization. Can you in the back cut the lights and hit that play on the video? Oh, can you pause the video? This is one of the greatest projects that was conceived that would uphold the national interest, not international cartels and the empire that seeks to destroy the powers of the nation state. And we would work with Canada to the benefit of both nations and uphold all of the necessities of commerce and production and agriculture. Go ahead and hit play. This is the North American Water and Power Alliance, and this is a continental system improving upon nature. It begs us to build the system because the water cycle is inefficient. Now we're zooming in here on the Mississippi River, currently dry. It's the drought and the barge is shut down. You see there's an inlet there. The Missouri River first. Now this is a pump you could bring out of the Missouri River by Fort Randall Dam in Nebraska, pump it up this river here, the Niobrara River, and bring it down to the Ogallala Aquifer Plain States, where 30% of our irrigation comes from that aquifer that's being drained. The Nawapa system itself, which we have on our website, comes up and meets with that Plains System Canal. And here you're looking at the Texas Water Plan, which is another way to pump water out in a flood year from the Mississippi River. So the Mississippi River and the Missouri River you can pump out in a flood year to serve these purposes for the Agaloa Aquifer in Texas. When it's dry, we should be diverting floodwaters from the east coast of the Rocky Mountains. Along here, you can see Saskatchewan, Alberta, of the plain states of provinces of Canada that bring into the Minnesota River down here on the right, and that brings water into the Mississippi River, just as that canal brought water into the Missouri River. And the water comes from the east slopes of the Rocky Mountains here, and large reservoirs of the north that bring, where we have 40 times the amount of runoff in these northern areas in the entire southwest of the U.S. and Canada. And we would bring down 72 million acre feet, which is only 5% of that wasted runoff. So 5% of what is wasted and flowing into the ocean will be brought down. Here we can see we would also pump water out of the Columbia River to divert it both the east and west Oregon deserts, and then down to Lake Shasta and supply the entire California River water system here with an additional 10 million acre feet a year, which is very large and substantial. And the Nawaba system itself, you can see all these branches down into California, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Texas, will link up with these additional extensions. As you can see up here, the Plain State Canal from the Missouri River will link up and could link up directly with the Southwest system. So when there's a flood, it should be diverted for the salvation of drought areas. When there's and so it's like an electrical grid. It should be moved where it needs to be when it, well, we shouldn't actually deregulate electricity like that. But yeah, what you're looking at is a total system to maintain and make sure that we, for the next 100 years, can ensure the productivity. What would this do? The massive industrialization of the nation and for nation building. Now, let me conclude. Sorry, I just lost my place here. Okay. I want to conclude by just saying that this system is why we, after Glass-Steagall, you cannot have a commercial banking system that will somehow generate and excrete by itself a recovery. Because the only valid profit of commercial banking systems is if it's within an industrial economy, because it's only the profit of, as I just described, turning raw materials into finished goods, building wealth that commercial banks should take part in, not shadow banking, which banks in the shadows of real profit. But it must be this type of plan, which is, again, the only way in which you could have private credit and federal credit function. Because without the generation of this kind of wealth, you don't have the ability to have any kind of credit at all, because you have no credit in the meaning of credibility to complete and build anything. And so all of the mutual funds of the 1990s, the fake profit, the false profit, which comes from this, with this so-called market, will probably disappear, because it was not real. Because the only valid wealth of nations is this type of building. And through this period where our nation was being destroyed and people were making false profits with the shadow bank system, don't expect it to be maintained. Because the issue of wealth is science and arts, and the ability to sustain a given level of energy flux density. Now, this principle is going to be learned painfully, but that principle will be learned. And what must be done now is that we have to get this single intention to replace the old system with one of nation building. We've almost destroyed ourselves entirely, but in order to change this course, we have to have a conscious and explicit commitment to nation building. And I would finally conclude by asking, where are the nation builders? Where is the plan among our nation's leaders, industrialists, and others of how the nation should be built? Not their state, not their city, but the nation as a whole. Well, we must create such nation builders, and where they do exist, but are individuals lurking in the shadows, you must seek them out and bind them into a force. Thank you.